expired. Senator Scarr.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Yesterday in this chamber, the Minister said, and I quote, "We are a government that delivers on our commitments, every single one of them," end quote. Minister, if your government is one that delivers on its commitments, why have you scrapped your promise to reduce electricity prices for Australian families by $275?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister.
Thank you, and thank you to Senator Scarr for giving me the opportunity to talk about how we're delivering on our commitments to the Australian people. This is a government that, over the last 6 months, has got to work day one delivering on all our commitments, including in relation to our Powering Australia plan, which has significant investments to fix the energy mess that we inherited after 10 years of denial, delay and dysfunction. And I'm not going to stop explaining to the people of Australia the situation that we inherited. Rising inflation, rising interest rates, a budget riddled with debt and deficit and pork barrelling and all the dodgy deals that have gone on, and we have started unwinding all of that and responding to that. And in the budget we had significant commitments into getting our Powering Australia plan on the ground. Because let's not forget, 9 years, 22 failed energy policies, none of them worked. We saw a 3 gigawatt decline in dispatchable power. That is under your record. We've got Snowy 2.0 running late. We had not one energy policy landed. And in the 6 months that we've been in charge, we have been investing in our Powering Australia plan. We've had Minister King deliver the supply that we need. We've had Ministers Bowen, the Treasurer and others to deal with the gas crisis or the energy increases we've got. And we stand by the fact that renewables are the cheapest form of energy, they are the cheapest form of power, and that increasing our investment in renewables will decrease energy prices.
Senator Scarr, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Minister, yesterday you also said, "We are not a government that breaks promises," end quote. If that's the case, will electricity prices be $275 lower for Australian households by the time of the next election?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister.
Thank you. Well, we will deliver our Powering Australia plan, which is the promise we took to the Australian people. It was supported by modelling done in 2020 about energy prices in 2025. Our commitment is to deliver the plan we took to the election. That is exactly what we are doing with our investments that we've made in the budget, in Marinus Link, in renewable energy zones, in offshore wind, in pumped hydro, in community batteries, in solar banks. All of that progressed in our first opportunity through our first budget. That is what a responsible, mature government does, delivering on our promises, responding to the economic circumstances of the time, delivering a sustainable and responsible budget, and delivering on those election commitments.
Senator Birmingham.
President, on the matter of direct relevance, Senator Scarr has asked directly about an element of the Powering Australia plan being the government's commitment to reduce power prices by $275. The minister may be being broadly relevant talking about the plan, but he was asking about a specific element of it, and I ask you to draw the minister to be directly relevant.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I do advise the Senate that at the start of this question there was a broader statement about promises generally, and I do believe that the minister is being relevant. Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister.
Thank you. We will deliver on our Powering Australia plan, which sets out all of our commitments as an overarching document, and we've made a cracking start of that in the first budget.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scarr, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. I note the minister has not referred to the magic $275 number, Why won't you just admit that your government does break its promises and within just a few months has abandoned its election promise to deliver a $275 electricity price reduction for Australian households?
Minister.
The question and the proposition outlined in the question is simply wrong. We are delivering on our Powering Australia plan, and the uncomfortable truth, President, that Senator Scarr is refusing to acknowledge is the chaos, dysfunction that we inherited from you. So we are not only delivering on our Powering Australia plan, we are also fixing the mess that they left. Fixing the mess in the energy markets that you left, where the lights were going to go out, where there wasn't enough supply, and the energy increases that you hid before the election, 20% increases. So we are fixing supply. We are working on how we can manage downward pressure on energy prices. And we've been upfront with the community about the situation we are facing, and at the same time, whilst fixing up all your mess, we're delivering on our commitments.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Grogan.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. The Liberals and Nationals said that low wages were a deliberate design feature of their economic strategy, and sadly it was the only strategy that they delivered. Now that Australians are feeling the crunch of cost of living rises and stagnant wages, can you outline the government's workplace relations policies, how they will actually help Australians deal with the cost of living and why this is actually important?
Minister.
President, and thank you, Senator Grogan. I would love nothing more than to explain how the government's workplace relations policies will help working people get ahead in life. Because I think one thing most Australians can agree on is that the workplace relations system in our country is not working for workers or for employers. It's not delivering the fairness, the gender equality, the productivity gains or the economic growth that Australia needs. But the Albanese government's workplace bargaining policies will get wages moving again. That's something Australian workers desperately need after nearly 10 years of low wages under those who sit opposite and still haven't changed their ways. The fact that this was, in their own words, a deliberate design feature of the previous government's management of the economy will be reminded of for many years to come. This shows how little those opposite think of workers in this country, and their contributions to the public debate on our policies have shown that nothing has changed. It's the same old from the Liberal and National parties in this country. The Albanese government's package has been designed to lift the wages of Australian workers by putting job security and gender equality as objects of the Fair Work Act, by creating a pay equity expert panel and a care and community sector expert panel to particularly assist women and those working in the care economy. We'll also make flexible work arrangements much more accessible and prohibit pay secrecy clauses so people, in particular women, are free to talk about their pay at work. We'll place limits on the use of fixed-term employment contracts so people don't get stuck on endless probation. We'll sunset substandard work choices era zombie agreements. We'll ensure the agreement termination process is fit for purpose and fair. We'll ban job ads that pay less than the minimum wage. We'll make the Better Off Overall test simple, flexible and fair, and we'll improve access to single and multi-employer agreements because bargaining delivers for workers and businesses. If you're serious about fixing the cost of living, you need to get wages moving for all Australians, and that's exactly what we'll do.
Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
Can the Minister outline how the government workplace relations policies will support businesses to avoid a race to the bottom on wages?
Minister.
I can, Senator Grogan, because we want to make more agreements that benefit both employers and workers. I understand that the concept of workers and businesses coming to agreements is something that the opposition just cannot get its head across, but actually it can be done. And importantly, we want to stop the race to the bottom by those who undercut businesses who are genuinely trying to do the right thing by their workers. Let me give you one great example of businesses who are embracing this new era of workplace relations that will benefit workers and employers. As reported this morning in the Financial Review, the Heating, Ventilation and Air Conditioning Manufacturing and Installation Association has wasted no time starting their multi-employer bargaining and we hear the laughter and the scoffs from those on the other side that there might be employers who actually want to come to agreements. Well, this group met the AMWU on Monday to discuss ways to use the new laws to deliver higher pay and standards for staff. This is what the Albanese Labor government wants to see more of: employers, unions and workers coming together to deliver a win-win.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Can the minister outline why it is urgent that the government acts on this workplace relations policies as a priority?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister.
I can, Senator Grogan, because it is urgent that we get wages moving again. And we understand from all the public debate we've seen over the last few months, backing in the last 10 years of inaction and deliberate design features of economy being low wages, that for the opposition it's never the right time for workers to get a pay rise. It was never the right time during the 10 years they were in office. It's not been the right time now that they're in opposition. Well, we've had enough. Workers have had enough. It's time to get wages moving again. The best way to do this is by encouraging more agreements to be made and stop a race to the bottom on wages. It's good to see that Senator Colbeck has got a little bit of fight left in him because no one else on the other side does. Australian workers have waited long enough, and while waiting they have turned up every day and done their job.
Order.
See, Richard, Senator Colbeck, I knew you could be an example for your colleagues. It's now. Workers have been waiting. They've been turning up every day and done their job. It's now time we did ours and legislated for secure jobs and better pay. Labor cares about working people. We care about giving them a pay rise so they can keep up with the rising.
Senator Dean Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. I refer to comments by the Assistant Treasurer reported in the Sydney Morning Herald on negotiations between the government and the Greens on the Financial Accountability Regime Bill. Mr Jones, the Assistant Treasurer, said there had been no sign-off on anything. Yet last week in the chamber, Senator McKim stated there is absolutely no doubt that Minister Jones and I had an agreement, and any claim that there was no agreement is false. Minister, can you clarify for the Senate, was there an agreement between Mr Jones and Senator McKim? And if so, why did the Assistant Treasurer renege on this deal?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, and I thank Senator Smith for the question. And I don't think it's any secret in this place that we work across the chamber negotiating legislation, possible amendments. We work collegiately where we can. That is our preference. We want to get legislation through. We've got a government for the first time in...
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Smith.
Point of order, President. The question was very specific. Was there an agreement?
And there was also a preamble, Senator Smith, so I will listen carefully to the Minister, and if she's not getting to the point of the question, I will draw her to it. But at the moment, she is being relevant. Minister.
Thank you. There were discussions, as you know, through the week around a whole range of pieces of legislation, including with the Greens on a number of pieces of legislation. On a number of pieces of legislation. In respect to one element of those, there is more work. There is more work to be done before we could finalise a position. We have explained that to the Greens. We have explained that to the Greens about the work that needs to be done from the government's point of view before we can reach agreement on one of those bills. And we appreciate the engagement of the Greens in assisting us with our legislation this week and with all colleagues in the chamber.
Minister Gallagher. Senator Smith.
President, with 45 seconds to go, I remind Senator Gallagher that the question was specific.
What's your point of order?
Was there an agreement?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Smith. The Minister has gone to the question of an agreement. Minister.
Thank you. We weren't able to reach a final agreement on that bill, and there have been discussions amongst the parties about how best to proceed. Where there isn't agreement that could be finally reached to progress the bill in this chamber. There had been discussions, and I accept that there is more work to be done. And I thank Senator McKim for his. I thank Senator McKim for his engagement. I would also point out. This is cleaning up, again, the legislation we are working on. Remember when you voted how many? 26 times against a Royal Commission into the banking and financial sector. This is actually progressing the outcomes
Thank you,
of
Minister.
that
Your
work.
time has expired. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. The Assistant Treasurer had a subsequent blunder yesterday when the government moved an amendment to a government bill being managed by the Assistant Treasurer that was identical to an opposition amendment the government had opposed in the House of Representatives. Has the Treasurer or his office met with the Assistant Treasurer to counsel him on parliamentary process, legislative
Senator
management?
Smith, please resume your seat. Minister Wong.
I submit that question is not a supplementary question.
Senator Birmingham. Order. Order. I'm waiting. Senator Wong, I've called Senator Wong. I've called Senator Wong. I've called Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, President. On the point of order, wide latitude was granted to the minister in answering the primary question. Correct. Wide latitude to talk generally about deals and about conduct. This goes very clearly to the conduct and capability of the Assistant Treasurer, who seems to be an ongoing embarrassment for the government.
Senator Birmingham, I listened carefully to the points that were made, and I am advised that it is not a supplementary question. Wong, Senator Wong, if I can finish, order. As Senator Birmingham, I'm going to finish my point of order. As Senator Birmingham said, often latitude is given, and latitude can be given on this occasion, but it is up to the minister whether she answers the question or not, and I'm going to invite Senator Smith to finish asking the question.
Shall I start again, President?
Order. Minister Wong.
Just suggest that we're happy to give leave for him to rephrase the question.
In your hands, Senator Smith.
Has the Treasurer or his office met with the Assistant Treasurer to counsel him on parliamentary process, legislative management, or how to conduct negotiations with parliamentary colleagues in good faith?
I think that thank you. I'll give the minister the opportunity to answer it.
Particular piece of legislation. Can I just say that Minister Jones is an absolutely fine minister and an outstanding person and a good friend of mine, and I have known him since I was 25 years old, and he, just a couple of summers ago, just a couple of turns around the clock.
Order.
He has hit the ground running again, cleaning up 9 years of wasted time, of work that was left undone, of recommendations that weren't followed through, and he is putting through a legislative agenda that we are working through, including probably
Senator
each
June.
sitting week in this place. Now, I have no doubt that Minister Jones, in his work with stakeholders, in the work that he will do to finalise the position, to consult further, will include consultations with the Greens and with others to look at how we can get legislation progressed.
Senator Smith, second supplementary.
It's hit the ground running and fallen over. Given it is clear that the Assistant Treasurer is not capable of managing Treasury legislation, conducting negotiations, managing stakeholders or administering his portfolio, does the Treasurer retain confidence in the abilities of his Assistant Treasurer?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
It's the first half of that question, but I answered it in the second question, which is Minister Jones is an outstanding minister and a fine colleague who works day and night in his portfolio. There are a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot of different views in this sector. I've had the shadow portfolio. It is not an easy portfolio to manage. There are stakeholders, there are different points of view. It's got a heavy legislative focus. It involves lots of engagements across the financial services sector, from the big banks to the consumer representatives and everything in between. And he is doing an outstanding job in delivering on the government's agenda, the reforms that we want to see done. And in the case of the legislation that Senator Smith's original question related to before he veered off track, there is more work to be done to reach agreement about how to progress that through the Senate, including talking with stakeholders, and that was the decision that the government took this week.
Your time has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson.
President, before I start, or before you start the clock ticking over, and I'm sorry if I've missed it, I just wonder if we could acknowledge the visiting New Zealand delegation of parliamentarians in the chamber today.
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson, and I do acknowledge our visiting delegation from New Zealand, and welcome to the Senate.
They are missing the Greens, but they're still very welcome.
Thank you. Now, your question. Thanks. Now, Senator
my question is to Senator Wong, representing the Climate Minister. Minister, another UNESCO scientific report has recommended that the Great Barrier Reef be put on the World Heritage in Danger list because its outstanding universal values are threatened by climate change. In responding to the report this morning, the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, publicly acknowledged we need to keep warming below 1.5 degrees to save the Great Barrier Reef. Minister, your government's legislated 43% emissions reduction target by 2030 is consistent with 2 degrees of global warming, and the science tells us this is a death sentence to the reef as we have known it. Millions of Australians who love the reef won't be fooled by this apparent cognitive dissonance. Minister, what is it going to be? A climate plan that limits global warming to 1.5 degrees and gives the reef a chance, or 2 degrees and a death sentence for the reef as we have been lucky enough to have known it in our lifetimes?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister.
This government was elected with a plan to take strong action on climate, and that is what we will do. This party, over many years, over a decade, has had a very clear, ambitious and strong position on climate. And we have not just talked about it. We won government and we delivered. Action on climate. Regrettably, we lost government and it has been a number of years, nearly 10 years, not only of inaction but of denial and delay and dysfunction on that side of the parliament, and Australia is poorer for it. Australia is the poorer for it. I am asked about the 43% target. We were clear with the Australian people before the election, and I would make the point that is consistent with a net zero by 2050 position that we also have been committed to. We've been committed to. Now, it is the case that we have. I'll make 2 points about the Great Barrier Reef. The first is that Senator Canavan, I've been having to Senator Canavan to me. I'd make 2 points about the Great Barrier Reef. Firstly, obviously, climate is a risk to all of our natural environment. We know that. We've been told that. That is why we need to take the action we are taking. That is why we need to work as we did at the previous conference of the parties. I know those opposite don't like to hear this, as Minister Bowen did at the conference of the parties, to ensure there is no backsliding on the Glasgow commitments, and we maintain the ambitious position and continue to build on the position that was agreed in Glasgow. We also have a lot of work to do in our domestic economy, and the government is committed to doing so.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Whish-Wilson, first supplementary.
There are 114 new fossil fuel projects awaiting approval in Australia. Minister, do you agree that every new fossil fuel project approved is a nail in the coffin of the Great Barrier Reef? How can we save the reef and keep warming to 1.5 degrees if we are actively and deliberately making climate change worse?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister.
I don't accept the premise at the end of that question, which suggests that a government that is willing to work with the Australian people to shift this economy from being one of the most emissions-intensive economies in the world to a 43% reduction by 2030 and a 2050 reduction, net zero by 2050. And it might be, you see, the thing about the Greens is they think you can say a target and it'll be delivered.
Order.
You say a target and it'll be delivered. You see, we actually understand there are workers and industries and communities and people who have to be part of this journey. We all have to change. We all have to change. And I am grateful, as I've said previously, that the Australian people have elected a parliament and a government that is willing to act on climate. And we will. And we will. And no amount of coming in here and asking questions like that, which suggests that we also don't care, will detract from the fact that we are serious about taking action, and we will.
Senator Whish-Wilson, second supplementary.
We'll find out how serious you are very soon, Senator Wong. Minister, the previous Morrison government went to extraordinary and shameful lengths to lobby, deny, dodge and deceive the international community and prevent an in-danger listing of the Great Barrier Reef by the UNESCO World Heritage Committee. Will your government do the same, or do you now accept the reef's outstanding universal values are in danger in line with this morning's released report?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
Well,
Order.
Well, as the Environment Minister made clear today—
Senator Canavan. Minister Wong, please resume your seat. Senator Whish-Wilson, you've asked your question to Minister Wong. She was on her feet with an answer, but there was so much interjection across the chamber, she could not— Senator Canavan, you were one of the people I just called. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. Look, we understand the position in relation to the Great Barrier Reef. I'll just make the point that I understand the report is not an in-danger listing, it's advice to the World Heritage Committee, and obviously the mission report is one source of information that will inform UNESCO's advice to the committee about the state of conservation of the reef. As Ms Plibersek said this morning, we understand, and those opposite might like to deny it.
Senator, Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Whish-Wilson.
President, I asked whether—
Senator, what is your
point of relevance? I asked the the senator, whether they were going to back the previous government stance on denying the UNESCO report and the advice on the Barrier Reef being in danger.
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. There was an enormous preamble also to that question, and the minister is being relevant. Minister.
I was directly responding that the mission report is one source of information that will inform UNESCO's advice to the World Heritage Committee about the state of conservation of the reef. I was also referencing the Environment Minister's statement this morning that, unlike those opposite, we don't deny that climate change has an effect on the reef and on all of our natural environment.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Green.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Wong. Minister, how will an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice help close the gap in life outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians?
Minister.
Thank you. And I thank Senator Green for her question, and I thank the many senators across this place, on this side of the chamber, but not only, who have sought to engage with this important reform respectfully and in a non-partisan way. President, we know that the gap in life expectancy between non-Indigenous and Indigenous Australians is unacceptably wide, 7.8 years for women, 8.6 years for men, and none of us should accept this. I think all of us should recognise that decades of failed government policies have failed First Nations peoples and failed to close the gap. And this is precisely the point about the proposed voice to the Parliament. It came about because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people wanted a greater say in the matters that affect them. They want to be empowered to take control of their own lives, not have policies and laws dictated to them by politicians and bureaucrats in Canberra. The Voice is about enabling a better future that will improve the lives of Indigenous Australians on the ground, in communities, in practical ways. Better outcomes in health, education, housing. Because we know from experience that you cannot create better policy and close the gap without listening to and hearing the voices of our First Nations people. The solutions to so many challenges are to be found in those communities, not in Canberra. And the Voice will make sure those solutions are heard by policy makers here in the Parliament. I note the decision of some opposite to oppose the Voice before they've even seen the legislation. And the argument seems to be, we need change, so let's keep doing more of the same. Well, Australians know that does not make sense. And it is ultimately the Australian people, not the politicians, who will decide this referendum. And I believe Australians want to see a better future for all Australians.
Your time has expired. Senator Green, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. How will the Voice ensure the views of First Nations peoples in remote and regional Australia are heard?
Minister.
Thank you to Senator Green for her supplementary question. Let's remember this. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was the outcome of 12 regional dialogues. 12 regional dialogues in places like Dubbo, Broome, Ross River, Cairns, with representatives from right across remote and regional Australia. So the arguments that some make, somewhat mischievously, that this is all about what people in the cities want aren't correct. They aren't correct. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was an historic First Nations consensus. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was an historic First Nations consensus on the way forward. And as part of that, the Voice to the Parliament...
Minister, please resume your seat. The interjections across the chamber are disorderly. I have the minister on her feet answering her question. Order. Order. Please continue, Minister.
You're here.
Minister, Senator Payne.
In relation to language used by a senator, it's not acceptable to swear across the chamber.
Senator, order. Order. Thank you. I did not hear that interjection. I am going to ask the senator to withdraw, but I'm also going to ask senators to listen with respect. Senator Chisholm.
Withdraw.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was a historic First Nations consensus on the way forward. And as part of that, the Voice to the Parliament will make sure voices in rural and regional communities are heard on policies and on laws.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Green, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, what are the next steps on the road to a referendum on an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice?
Minister.
Thank you to Senator Green. A bill to update the Referendum Machinery Act will shortly be introduced to the Parliament. This will take into account advice from the Referendum Working Group, which has set out key principles for the voice which Senator Dodson has spoken about in this place, including that it provides independent advice to the Parliament and the Government, it is chosen by and representative of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it is empowering, community-led, inclusive, respectful, culturally informed and gender-balanced and includes youth, is accountable and transparent and works alongside existing structures. Let us remember what was said in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. This is what was said to the nation. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and to take a rightful place in our country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish, they will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Immigration, Minister Watt. Many would have seen the hundreds of people gathered out the front of Parliament House rallying against the government's failure to take action so far to address the truly heartbreaking plight of people languishing on bridging visas. In the gallery is Zahara, who I sat down with this morning to hear her story. Zahara is a refugee from Iran who was part of the first family sent to Nauru last time Labor was in government. Last year, Zahara's eldest daughter, Saha, finished school and won a scholarship to study at the Newcastle University. She started studying this year, but after 7 weeks, the government took her study rights away and she had to leave because she turned 18 and was on a bridging visa. Minister, why won't the government let Saha follow her dream to become a human rights lawyer and complete her studies?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Pocock, for your question, and Zahara and Saha, welcome to the Senate. It's terrific that you've been able to join everyone here today. Our government has obviously put forward a range of policies for how we intend to deal with people who are on bridging visas, in addition to people who continue to be in offshore processing, particularly in Nauru. These are very difficult issues, and I understand the difficulties that it causes, no doubt, to Zahara and to Saha and the rest of their family. But these are issues that we are trying to balance with a range of other factors to make sure that the policies that we do ultimately bring in are enduring and can remain in place into the longer term. So this does take some time, and I understand that that does leave some individuals in difficult circumstances. And again, I understand that that is not an easy situation. Senator Pocock, as you may know, in my work career before I came here, I did quite a lot of legal work with refugees, and I know there are other members in this chamber who have done the same thing. So we do, I can assure you, understand the personal difficulties that these situations cause. But we are weighing up a range of factors, and I do hope that we can come to a resolution of these issues as quickly as possible, so that people like Zahara and Saha are relieved of the burden that they're currently under.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Pocock, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Given these families have been living with so much uncertainty for so long, are you able to inform the Senate and Zahara when people like her who have been living in our community, working and paying taxes, will have their migration status finally resolved? What is the timeline?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Again, I obviously can't give a particular time frame for particular individuals, but one of the issues that we have had to deal with since taking office is the outrageous backlog in visa applications that existed under the former government. I was shocked. I was shocked when we came to office that the backlog in visa applications had blown out to nearly 1 million in this country. And that compares, when we lost office in 2013, there was a backlog of about 200,000. It had blown out under the former government to nearly 1 million. And this is affecting a range of people in our community. It is no doubt affecting Zahara and Saha and her family. It is affecting a large number of other people on bridging visas. It's also impacting employers, including in industries like agriculture, in manufacturing and many other industries who cannot get the workers that they need because the backlog is so long. We have applied increased resources to the Immigration Department to clear that backlog, and it's now down well below 900,000. It's something we intend to pursue.
Minister Watt, your time has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. Minister, apart from pointing to the backlog, what is the reason that the government has taken 6 months to put forward some clarity on an election commitment?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister.
Again, Senator Pocock, I do understand that people who are waiting for visa applications to be processed, that is a really difficult situation for people to be in. And as I say, as well as impacting on those people who are waiting for those applications to be processed, it's impacting on employers all around the country who are desperate to get workers, who have been waiting for their visas to be processed for a very long time. And for all the complaints we hear from people on the other side about what needs to be done to assist regional employers get the workers they need, they did nothing about the visa backlog, and it's also, of course, impacting on the very people that you're asking about. At the Jobs and Skills Summit, we committed to put on about, I think it was 500 extra immigration staff to help clear that backlog, in addition to the work that had already been done. And it's because of that we've now been able to bring that backlog down to 800,000 from the nearly 1 million we inherited. It's still too long. We're still putting in more resources, and hopefully that will make a difference to the people that you're asking questions about.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Davey.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad the Minister has been talking about workers in the regions, because my question is to the same Minister but with his emergency management hat on, Senator Watt. Minister, in estimates, I asked you whether the Regional Small Business Support Program was to be continued after the end of the current round of funding on December 31st. Your answer at the time was that you were considering your options. Minister, what are those options?
Thank you, Senator Davies. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Davey. I presume the program you're talking about is the Regional Small Business Support Program pilot, which was a form of financial counselling that was offered, I think originally after the bushfires is when it actually started, but certainly it's been going for a couple of years. As I indicated to you at estimates, that was a matter that we were giving consideration to, because the former government, despite saying that they thought this was a really important program, only decided to put money in the budget through till the 31st of December this year. So I don't quite understand why the former government that you were part of decided to have a funding cliff for this service, given that you thought it was so important. But be that as it may, again, that's something that we've inherited. And I recently approved an extension of that service to the 31st of March 2023, so that these services had funding certainty to carry them through the high-risk weather season. Now, as I'm not sure, Senator Davey, whether you're aware, but the former government, of which you were a part, actually commissioned a review of this service, which found that rather than the service primarily being used by businesses who were suffering from the impact of natural disasters, in fact it was mainly being used to deal with issues arising from COVID-19 and the impact on businesses from that, and also from other matters as well, and certainly not the kind of floods that we're seeing at the moment. But we decided, regardless of the findings of that review, that it was important to give those services certainty, it was important to give their clients certainty, and that's why we extended it until the 31st of March next year to carry them through this disaster season. Those services that have funding remaining at that point in time will be able to continue it beyond the 31st of March till the 30th of June next year. And in the meantime, we are giving thought to what other services and funding could be provided to provide the kind of financial counselling that you're talking about. But it would have really helped if the funding didn't cut out at the 31st of December in the first place.
Senator Davey, first supplementary.
Thank you very much. And I would say, you know, we were expecting to be able to do a MyEFO which could have addressed that. We appreciate hearing that it's extended to the 31st of March. I am amazed to hear that you don't consider COVID-19 a disaster for small businesses. Minister, you have in your possession a letter written to you by the New South Wales Rural Financial Counselling Service Director.
Senator Davey, your time has expired. Minister Watt?
I don't think I got a question there, President, but I think I know generally where it was heading. Yeah.
Minister.
To finish the question.
Leave's been granted for you to finish the question.
I really appreciate that. How will hundreds and possibly thousands of farmers and rural small businesses be assisted if these financial counsellors are not funded to continue their work post what you've now confirmed 31st of March 2023?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister.
Plated in your last budget.
Thank you, Senator Davey. And as I say, this program was initially created to assist small businesses who were suffering financial impacts of drought or natural disasters. And as I say, the review that was commissioned by the government of which you were a part found that in actual fact most people were using it for the business impacts of COVID-19, which is not what the service was provided for. But I had the option of pursuing what your government had put in place, which was to cut the funding out at the 31st of December. But my view was that it was important that those services and their clients had certainty to carry them through the disaster season, which is why we have made extra funding available to carry them through that season. That's not what your government did. Your government, in all of its budgets, didn't extend the funding beyond the 31st of December. So we are continuing that service. And you mentioned farmers, Senator Davey. There's actually a separate funding program available for rural counselling for farmers, and that remains in place. There is no risk to that funding at all, and you shouldn't be mixing up those programs.
Your time has expired. Senator Davey, second supplementary.
So what does the Rural Financial Counselling Service say to the current 130 small business clients that they are going to be unable to assist post maybe 31st of March 2023, which was not in the budget, and who will provide advice to these businesses in West Wyalong local government area and others like that?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister.
Thank you, President. Senator Davey, it's obviously a matter for each of those services to decide what they want to say to their clients, but one thing they might say is that isn't it good that we had a government that extended our funding beyond the 31st of December this year? Because, of course, that was the situation that your government left them in, that the funding was going to cut out at the 31st of December this year. You might have forgotten about it, but your government had a budget back in, I think it was March or April this year, and decided to not extend the funding. And now you want to come in here and say why we haven't provided funding any more long-term than what you did. We've actually extended this funding beyond what your government had agreed to the 31st of March this year, because we do recognise that these people need some certainty. Your government decided that it was going to cut out the funding right in the middle of the disaster season. That's how much you cared about those services. We've actually taken a different view, provided that certainty, and as I say, there is an ongoing program for rural financial counselling for farmers. There is no risk to that whatsoever, and in the meantime we are considering other options for financial counselling for businesses to go with the grants that have already been approved for those small businesses.
Senator Lambie.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is for the Minister representing the Minister of Defence, Minister Wong. Last week it was revealed that the Chief of Defence Force, General Angus Campbell, has given officers of Special Operations Task Group 28 days to provide reasons for why they should not have to return any honours they received throughout service in Afghanistan. This order applies to officers of the ranks of Captain and Brigadier. It excludes officers of the rank of Major General. How convenient. One officer of the rank of Major General, who was in the headquarters responsible for the Special Operations Task Group, who received a Distinguished Service Cross for his service, was now General Angus Campbell. Does the Minister support there being one rule for the higher-ups and one rule for the rest?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. This obviously goes to the implementation of the Brereton report, which contained 143 recommendations, many of which were resolved by the previous government. The Deputy Prime Minister has instructed Defence to detail a pathway for closing out the remaining 42 recommendations. One of the outstanding recommendations is the one referenced in Senator Lambie's question, which deals with the review of the award of decorations to those in command positions at troop, squadron and task group level during particular Special Operations Task Group rotations. I am advised that the Chief of Defence Force has written to a small number of people. Obviously, I don't propose to comment on the outcome of each of those particular considerations. I would make the point that the government's focus is on implementing the Brereton recommendations. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, in relation to the last part of your question, Senator Lambie, Mr Miles has stated that there is no cause to extend the parameters of the recommendation. And where the CDF has acted, it is because there is an evidence-based reason to do so. The government remains committed to ensure that the outstanding recommendations of the Brereton report are appropriately acted upon. I'm advised the CDF is seeking to do that where there has been a detectable pattern of behaviour underpinned by credible reports of misconduct by ADF in personnel in Afghanistan. I'm also advised this applies to a very small number of people.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. The Officer of Special Investigator is investigating soldiers while the higher commanders are protected by what the Afghanistan Inquiry Oversight Panel calls a blanket exemption from liability. Given the extent of findings that have led to this punitive action, does the Minister believe this blanket exemption remains appropriate?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you to Senator Lambie, and I do acknowledge her ongoing focus on not only these issues but the issues of the welfare of serving and previously serving personnel. The focus the government and, as I'm advised, the CDF are taking are to implement the Brereton report recommendation. The parameters of those recommendations were obviously a matter for the Brereton report, and the Deputy Prime Minister has, as I said, stated that the government does not believe there is cause to extend the parameters of the recommendations. We are committed to implementing the report to the fullest extent possible. We understand this is a difficult issue, but one that DPM has made clear our commitment.
Thank you, Minister. Your time has expired. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
The blanket exemption has been criticised on both its grounds and its effects by a number of well-credentialed experts in this space. If the Chief of Defence Force can decide to demand the return of medals, who has the authority to decide whether to demand the return of his?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Wong.
The advice I have is a defence honour may only be cancelled by the Governor-General, that the process would be that in relation to any such cancellation, that the relevant minister would make a recommendation to the Governor-General to cancel such an honour. But I again make this point, and I don't intend to get into personal reflections on anybody, that the government's view and the CDF's actions are consistent with this, is that the recommendations of the Brereton report should be acted upon. CDF's actions are consistent with the government's policy position.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister update the Senate on some of the challenges facing the country and how the government is responding with responsible economic management?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator O'Neill and I acknowledge her length of service in the economic portfolio and all the achievements she's made there. This is an important question and the opportunity to update the Senate on global conditions impacting Australian households. Last week, the OECD released its updated outlook, which outlined some of those tough challenges ahead. The report showed that the global economy is experiencing the most profound energy crisis since the 1970s, while also dealing with the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Russia's war in Ukraine is driving significantly higher energy prices all around the world. In the report, the OECD is predicting global growth to slow from 3.1% to 2.2% next year. We know that the economic pressures coming at us from around the world are felt most acutely around the kitchen table. Australian households are more exposed to these global conditions than they should be due to the wasted decade of the Liberals and Nationals government's policy failures. While the government cannot control many of the global pressures that will impact on Australian households, we are working to clean up the mess left behind by those opposite and take control of what we can. We're responding to the legacy of a wasted decade in energy, in skills, in productivity and in real wages growth. But we're taking a responsible approach. That's why our budget was the most responsible budget in years, returning 99% of the tax revenue upgrades over the next 2 years to the budget, in comparison with the Liberal and Nationals average of around 40%. This is responsible budget management that prevents no extra pressure on inflation, and we are absolutely determined to get wages moving again, because we know a strong economy has to mean strong wages for workers. Otherwise, the economy is not delivering for the working people like it needs to.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill, first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your kind words and for your excellent response about responsible economic management. Can the Minister outline what assessment the International Monetary Fund recently made of the government's economic management?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator O'Neill for the supplementary, and yes, I can. The IMF's recent statement confirms that the Albanese Labor government's budget was responsible, right for the time, and readies Australia for the future. This is a ringing endorsement of the government's approach to responsible economic management. The IMF states that the government's near-term fiscal restraint will support monetary policy in addressing demand pressures. This is an endorsement of our fiscal strategy, which puts a premium on restraint. As a result of our spending discipline, payments will fall in real terms over the next 2 years, and real spending growth averages just 0.3% over the forward estimates. The October budget introduced responsible spending measures to provide cost of living relief, alleviate skill shortages, promote productivity growth and facilitate the climate transition. The IMF notes that the budget streamlining of spending should help to avoid adding to aggregate demand pressures in the economy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator O'Neill, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. And can you also detail what the IMF had to say about the government's plan to boost inclusion, to encourage female workforce participation and to tackle skill shortages?
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank again Senator O'Neill for that excellent question. Under those opposite, our economy wasn't delivering like Australians needed it to. The IMF praised the government's policy that tackles skill shortages and boosts workforce participation, including key outcomes of the Jobs and Skills Summit. Our budget delivered quality investments in the capacity of the Australian economy and the capabilities of the Australian people. This includes our fee-free TAFE and more university places, delivering cheaper childcare for 1.26 million families, expanding paid parental leave to 26 weeks for working parents, and the IMF's independent assessment confirms that despite a difficult international outlook and significant economic and budget challenges here at home, Australians should be optimistic about the longer-term future of our economy and our country.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is to the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Wong. I refer to the proposed parliamentary sitting schedule for 2023 that has been widely distributed by the government and which shows that the government wants to scrap additional budget estimates for early next year. A departure from practice in place since the 1990s. Minister, when Labor was elected, the Prime Minister said the Australian people deserve accountability and transparency. Why then is this government scrapping additional estimates and reducing Senate estimates scrutiny from the conventional 4 weeks in a normal year to just 3 weeks?
Order. I have not yet called the Minister. We are fortunate that Senator Birmingham has a loud and clear voice because it was very hard to hear the question from the interjections. Minister Wong.
I didn't see much.
Senator McKenzie, I've just brought the chamber to order. Minister.
Well, I do love a question on accountability and transparency from the coalition, and I particularly love it on a day that we know that the House is preparing this week to debate a censure of your former leader for the double-up ministers that he's invented. And I'm asked a question by a man who probably knew about Mr Taylor. Mr Taylor covering up the price increase ahead of the election. Where was your interest? Where was your interest then, Senator Birmingham? Where was your interest then, Senator Birmingham?
Senator Wong. Order. Order on my right and left. I have a senator on her feet. Order. Senator O'Neill, Senator Bilyk and Senator Ayres. Order. Senator Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. On relevancy, point of order. The minister's gone nowhere near accountability and transparency.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Thank you.
Sorry,
Order.
I haven't finished.
Thank you, Senator Mackenzie. Please, Senator Mackenzie. Senator Mackenzie, it is not a debating point. You raised your point. Senator Mackenzie, you're not in a debate with me. You raised a point of order. I asked you to resume your seat. That is what I expect you to do. I will draw Minister Wong to the substantive nature of Senator Birmingham's question.
Well, thank you. I was responding to the request to talk about transparency and accountability and, well, isn't it interesting? He's all of a sudden, now he's on the other side of the table. He was happy to protect Senator Mackenzie. He was happy. He's happy not to condemn the former Prime Minister. He's happy to defend Mr Taylor hiding a price increase in electricity before the election. All of those things he's happy to do, but now he cares about Senate estimates. If the Leader of the Opposition would like to have a look at what is actually happening, you've still got Senate estimates going. We've still got Senate estimates going. We've still got last night, Senator Gallagher was again there answering Senator Hume's question. There was an air of great repetition to them, but we're very happy to keep answering the same questions over and over again.
Senator Wong. Senator McGrath.
A point of order on relevance. The question went to the sitting schedule in relation to estimates being reduced by 25%, and Minister Wong has gone nowhere near the estimate schedule. I don't think she's mentioned, the minister's mentioned estimates at all.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. The question also contained other elements which the minister has gone to. I'll remind her of the question, and she has 14 seconds left. Thank you, Minister
Thank you.
Wong.
The Senate will be aware that we have just delivered a budget. Estimates hearing followed that. Spillover hearings are continuing this week. There will obviously not be a MyEFO, so there will not be estimates after that. But we are very happy to keep doing endless estimates if those opposite wish.
Senator Birmingham, first supplementary. Senator Wong, please resume your seat.
Would have been unbearable.
Order. I have called your leader to ask his first supplementary. Thank you, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. Will the government drop its outrageous proposal to cut Senate estimates in 2023 by a full week and instead commit to programming additional estimates hearings early next year, as has been the practice on both sides of this parliament for decades? Or is the government's assurances of transparency and accountability just another broken promise?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Order. 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 Minister.
As I've said, I understand that the proposal involves a recognition that we have just had a budget, therefore there is not intended to be a MyEFO. It is usual that additional estimates would follow MyEFO. So I understand that I would anticipate that the usual pattern of budget MyEFO with additional and supplementary and budget estimates would be returned to when the post and the election we settle into the normal MyEFO and budget process. But again, I say, no one in this place, I suspect even on that side, believes it when you talk about transparency, Senator Birmingham, because we lived through 9 years of your government refusing to legislate an anti-corruption commission.
Minister Wong, your time has expired. Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. The government's proposed sitting schedule for 2023 also proposes 4 additional Senate-only sitting days on a Friday. However, the Senate's standing orders provide for no established routine of business on a Friday. In the interests of accountability and transparency, Senator Wong, will the government commit to having a question time on any scheduled Friday sittings?
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. Minister Wong.
Thank you, President. We will work with the Senate. We will work with this.
Order. 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 Senator Birmingham has just completed a question. The minister was on her feet answering it, and I've had to immediately call you to order. Minister.
Of course we will work with the Senate on how Fridays would be arranged, just as we have worked with the opposition and the crossbench on how we would deal with this sitting week, and as we dealt with last sitting week. No, so, well, Senator Birmingham, Senator Gallagher has been very consultative, including with your colleague, on Friday sittings this week. I would anticipate the same degree of consultation would be engaged in by the government, which of course is very different to what we saw from those opposite when in government. And on that basis, President, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.
Thank you, Minister.